Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something, well, pretty ambitious. We're looking at 2 centuries of economic power.
Yeah, the big question is how it's gained, how it's kept, and, how it's actually used.
Exactly. So our mission is to kind of pull apart the anatomy of concentrated power. We've got sources stretching all the way from the Gilded Age railroad barons.
Right up to today's tech titans and the world of high finance. It's quite the span.
It really is. And what's fascinating as we started digging into this is how consistent things are.
That's the core insight, isn't it? The technology changes dramatically. Steam engines, oil pipelines, now algorithms and AI, but the actual strategies, the playbook for getting and holding on to dominance, it feels remarkably similar.
Whether it's railroads or, social media platforms.
Precisely. The underlying patterns for concentrating power just keep repeating.
Okay, so let's dive in. We probably need to start where, arguably, modern monopoly really got its footing, controlling essential infrastructure.
Right. The physical pathways.
And if we're talking pure, unvarnished power, well, you almost have to begin with Cornelius Vanderbilt. His whole philosophy was just raw.
Oh, absolutely. That famous quote kind of says it all, doesn't it? Law. What do I care for law? Ain't I got the power?
It perfectly captures that Gilded Age mindset, doesn't it?
It really does. Because Vanderbilt saw business as constant warfare. And in war, you use every weapon you have. His power wasn't just like theoretical wealth. It was grounded in controlling the actual choke points, the infrastructure itself.
And he wasn't just aggressive, he was incredibly strategic about which infrastructure to control. Our sources really emphasize this.
Yeah, he had this knack for spotting transportation routes that offered a decisive, almost permanent edge. He wasn't just laying track randomly. He was optimizing the entire logistical map.
Like the Nicaragua route to California back in the 1850s. That's a great example.
It is, because everyone focuses on Panama as the competitor, right?
Right.
But Vanderbilt saw something deeper. He realized the Nicaragua route used significantly less coal.
Because the steamship legs were shorter.
Exactly. Shorter voyages meant burning way less fuel. And back then, coal was a massive operating expense. So having a route that structurally used less coal, that was a huge sustainable cost advantage that nobody could just easily copy.
So it wasn't just about being faster. It was about a fundamental built-in cost efficiency, a structural advantage.
Precisely. And you see that same thinking with his investment in the Harlem Railroad. Most people thought it was, kind of a struggling line when he bought it.
But he saw its unique potential.
He saw its one huge strength. It went right into the heart of Manhattan, down 4th Avenue, and critically, it included the rights to the city's streetcar line. No other steam railway had that kind of direct access into the city center.
Which gave him enormous leverage over any other railroad trying to get into New York.
Totally. It wasn't luck. It was recognizing that with infrastructure, the physical geography and the legal rights tied to it, well, that's everything. That's destiny.
That really sets the stage. Once you control that essential pipeline, physical or, as we'll see later, digital, you basically control the market.
Yeah, you're the gatekeeper.
Okay, so from the physical rails to the next great commodity that really defined an era, oil. And here, of course, we run into John D. Rockefeller Sr.
Ah, Rockefeller. He took Vanderbilt's playbook and, well, perfected it for industrial consolidation, and he added this layer of information control. Frankly, it sounds a lot like corporate espionage, even by today's standards.
The speed he moved at in the 1870s is just staggering when you look back.
It really is. His method was about hitting competitors everywhere, all at once. As soon as he got that famous Saratoga Springs deal done with the railroads, the one giving him those preferential shipping rates,
You weaponize it immediately.
instantly.
Yeah.
He used that leverage to just gobble up competitors. The Pittsburgh consolidation is the classic example.
Right, walk us through that. It shows the ruthlessness, but also the efficiency.
Okay, so deal in hand, he moves on Pittsburgh, absorbs more than half the refining capacity there almost immediately. At the same time, he takes over the biggest refinery in Philadelphia. But here's the really clever bit.
How he handled the ones left standing.
Exactly. He basically turned the local businessmen he'd just bought out into his agents. They knew the local scene, right? So now, working for Standard Oil, they went around and supervised the buyout of all the remaining small, independent refiners in the area.
Wow, so he used their own networks and relationships against them, essentially.
Pretty much. It was local domination achieved through, well, a combination of stealth and overwhelming financial muscle. You had 22 refiners in Pittsburgh when he started. 2 years later, only one was still independent.
One. That's total market capture.
It's the definition of monopoly control.
And what's really interesting is how Rockefeller then pivoted. He didn't just want favorable rates from the railroads. He wanted to control the infrastructure itself.
Yeah, he learned you couldn't be at the mercy of the railroad barons forever. That move in 1874, the deal with the Erie Railroad, that was brilliant.
Where Standard Oil took over the Weehawken terminal.
That's the one. By getting control of that key terminal in New Jersey, Standard Oil basically embedded itself inside the transportation system. He wasn't just negotiating rates anymore. He was starting to control the physical handling and distribution.
It's like, if you can't beat the gatekeepers, buy the gate, or at least a piece of it.
That's the ultimate power move, isn't it?
And supporting this whole operation, this huge, complex, very secretive empire, was Standard Oil's intelligence network.
Ah, yes, the information gathering. This is where it gets murky, crossing into what we definitely call corporate espionage today.
Though Rockefeller tried to downplay it.
He did. Publicly, he framed it as just, good business practice. He said it was a method in universal use by the largest and most intelligent distributors. Basically, just advanced market research.
But internally, it caused real problems, didn't it? We have accounts for people who worked there.
We do. That former employee, Charles Woodbury, he quit specifically because of it, calling it espionage. He even described a confrontation where his boss told him straight up, "We do not intend merely to grasp the situation, we must control it."
Control it. That really captures the mindset. Ruthless.
It does. And here's where you see that classic dynamic of leadership and accountability, or lack thereof. While his managers and staff were out there doing the dirty work, Rockefeller himself maintained this distance. Plausible deniability.
He focused on the results, the numbers.
Exactly. Pushing for sales, pushing for market share, whipping up the competition internally, but apparently forswearing direct knowledge of the, let's say, less savory or outright illegal methods his people used to get those results. He just looked the other way.
The classic separation of strategy from execution. Okay, so if Rockefeller was the master of secrecy, Andrew Carnegie was kind of the opposite, right? Master of the public statements, a grand pronouncement.
Carnegie is such a fascinating contrast. His public image was incredibly paradoxical for that era. I mean, in 1885, you have the National Labor Tribune, a labor paper, running a lead story about his open confession of socialism.
Which must have horrified guys like Morgan or Vanderbilt.
Completely unthinkable for them. For a magnate of his stature to publicly talk about labor rights and social duties in that way was radical.
And this public commitment, his whole gospel of wealth idea, it actually put him in a really difficult personal bind regarding his own fortune, didn't it?
A huge bind. It was this deep conflict centered on time. He truly believed that a rich man had a moral duty to give away his surplus revenues wisely during his lifetime. So, morally, he should start giving it away sooner rather than later.
But economically?
Economically, his fortune was massive and still growing incredibly fast. Steel was booming. So the longer he waited to sell his holdings and start the big philanthropy push, the more money there would eventually be to give away.
Maximizing the eventual impact.
Right, so he was caught. Does he fulfill the moral duty now, or does he wait to maximize the amount he can give away later? It was a genuine dilemma for him.
That's dilemma you still hear echoes of today, actually. Tech billionaires talking about letting their wealth compound before giving it away. The fundamental tension hasn't really changed.
Not at all.
Okay, so we've got control of infrastructure, control of information. But how did these figures actually run these giant, often secretive or incredibly complex organizations? This brings us to another constant. Management by sheer force of personality. The strongman CEO.
Yeah, the leader whose personality, maybe even their temper or genius, just dictates everything. The archetypes are really striking here.
Let's start with the secretive genius type, like Howard Hughes.
Hughes took secrecy to an almost pathological level. It wasn't just about keeping competitors guessing. Sometimes he kept his own top people in the dark, too.
Like that story about the L-1011 plane acquisition attempt? He gave it a code name.
Project Greenland.
Right. Imagine trying to pull off a deal that massive, involving huge capital outlays and keeping it completely secret, even from your senior management under a code name. That level of paranoia and control is extreme.
And that secrecy seemed linked to this incredibly complex financial setup he created, primarily benefiting himself. The Medical Institute is the famous example.
Oh, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. That's a masterclass in using, shall we say, creative interpretation of tax law.
Lay it out for us because the structure is wild. It was officially an IRS-sanctioned charity, right?
Officially, yes.
But
the way it worked involved this complicated lease and sublease deal for the land his aircraft company sat on. If you look at the numbers for a specific period, say 1953 to 1967,
What do they show?
they show the Medical Institute got only about $2 million in actual charitable donations from the aircraft company during those years. But through this lease structure, the Institute paid Howard Hughes personally almost $23 million in interest and lease payments.
$23 million to him versus $2 million from the company for charity. Exactly. So the charity status essentially created this mechanism for him to pull huge amounts of money out, largely tax-advantaged. It benefited him vastly more than it benefited any actual medical research at the time.
It's incredible how often you see these legal or charitable structures used to shield or grow personal wealth. It feels very modern, but the roots go way back.
They absolutely do. Now, contrast that kind of calculated hidden maneuvering with the style of, say, a young Bill Gates, early Microsoft.
Right. Described as overtly confrontational.
Yeah, a former associate called him monstrously competitive, even used the phrase spoiled kid. That suggests a very different management style.
Leading through sheer force of will, maybe intimidation. And intelligence, obviously.
Seems like it. And that competitiveness spilled over into market tactics, particularly that famous tactic of promise.
Pre-announcing products.
Way before they were ready. Gates would, hint to the press about major products shipping soon. The interface manager is the classic example, sometimes weeks or months before they even had a working prototype running on an IBM PC.
So it wasn't about reality. It was about shaping perception, freezing the competition.
Precisely. Define the future. Make everyone wait for your product, even if it doesn't exist yet. That's very Silicon Valley, even back then.
Definitely. Okay, another archetype, the cost cutter. This CEO obsessed with efficiency, often leading to big cultural shifts. Jack Welch at GE is maybe the prime example here.
Oh, Welch. He completely transformed GE's culture, didn't he? He had this reputation for being totally unsentimental, completely focused on the bottom line.
And known for his temper, apparently.
Yeah, sources mention his adolescent temper, stories of him screaming at managers demanding, "What the fuck do I pay you for?" that kind of thing.
And that aggression found its way into company policy, right? With layoffs.
Absolutely. He really normalized mass layoffs. They weren't seen as a desperate last resort anymore, but more like a regular tool in the toolbox. An easy way, as one source puts it, to save money and boost profits, at least in the short term. It fundamentally changed GE from this somewhat stable, bureaucratic place into a much higher pressure, perform or else environment.
You see echoes of that relentless efficiency drive in someone like Jeff Bezos, too, although maybe manifested differently.
Right. Bezos championed decentralization in many ways, but he was known for these moments of intense personal focus, these aha moments. Descriptions say, like, all the blood in his entire body goes to his face.
Intense passion channeled into strategic direction.
An unwavering resolve, especially when pushing Amazon into new, risky areas like hardware with the Kindle. People inside the company, experienced manufacturing folks, told him it was too complex, too risky, way outside their expertise.
But he pushed it through anyway.
He was not deterred, just powered through all the internal resistance because he had this long-term vision. That kind of single-minded focus is definitely a common thread among these figures.
And we can't overlook the importance of managing the image of power, even when reality is more complex. Henry Ford seems like a master of this.
Ford absolutely was. He was obsessed with maintaining personal control, especially as corporations started getting more bureaucratic. He famously resisted replacing the Model T for far too long after it made economic sense.
But when the change finally happened,
He orchestrated this brilliant PR campaign. Suddenly, articles are appearing praising him as this visionary, this Lincolnian character, a restless, dynamic revolutionist who was bravely leading the company into the future by ditching the old car.
so the narrative became that he was the champion of change, when really he'd been the main obstacle to change.
Exactly. It completely flipped the script. It reinforced his image as the indispensable leader and helped him maintain that personal, almost autocratic control over the company, silencing any internal critics by controlling the public story.
Okay, this focus on management and control leads us straight into the underlying financial engine that makes all this concentration possible. We should probably bring in some broader economic context here, like the work of Thomas Piketty.
Yes, Piketty's work is crucial for understanding the deep currents driving inequality. His central idea is the Toradile inequality.
Right. Explain that for us.
Yeah.
R is the rate of return on capital.
And G is the rate of economic growth, like growth of the whole economy, wages, output, everything. Piketty's point is that when R is consistently and significantly greater than G, when the return on investments grows faster than the overall economy, wealth inevitably concentrates.
Because capital just compounds faster than wages or general economic output can keep up.
Precisely. It creates this powerful divergent force. And his research shows that the long-run level of inequality in a society is directly linked to how big that horizontal gap is. The bigger the gap, the more wealth piles up at the very top. Mathematically, it tends towards what's called a Pareto distribution.
The Pareto distribution, that's like the 80-20 rule, but often much more extreme for wealth, right? Where a tiny percentage holds a massive share.
Exactly. It's not linear. Wealth concentration driven by capital returns is exponential. You see this playing out dramatically in the modern era, especially in the US and other English-speaking countries. Since about 1980, the income share of the top 0.1%, the top thousandth in the US, has exploded. It went from around 2% of national income to nearly 10%.
Wow. That's a huge shift.
It is, and Piketty argues this isn't just random, it's a systemic result of that Hurriedal dynamic being particularly strong in recent decades. Capital returns have outpaced overall growth.
So that's the quiet engine driving the concentration in the background. Now let's look at some of the more active ways the financial machine accelerates this manipulation, hidden mechanisms, sometimes outright fraud. The LIBOR scandal is a pretty stark example.
Oh, LIBOR was huge. It really pulled back the curtain on how critical and how manipulable some of these obscure financial benchmarks are. LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate, was the basis for pricing literally hundreds of trillions of dollars in loans and derivatives worldwide. Mortgages, student loans, complex swaps, everything.
And individuals could manipulate it.
Individuals like Tom Hayes, yeah. He was a trader at UBS, and he basically saw his job as pushing LIBOR submissions the rates banks claim they could borrow at around to benefit his trading positions. He described himself as a pioneer of these aggressive new tactics. His goal was just to push things to the max to make money for the bank.
And it involved coordinating with lots of people.
Dozens. He'd routinely message brokers and traders at other banks asking them to nudge their LIBOR submissions up or down by tiny amounts like 1 basis point, 0.01%. But because his trading positions were so massive, even a tiny move in that benchmark could mean millions in profit or loss.
How much did he make for UBS doing this?
In 2008 alone, his desk reportedly made $64 million for UBS, largely through these kinds of manipulations. It just shows the incredible leverage you get from fiddling with the core infrastructure of finance.
It really does. Okay, let's shift from benchmark manipulation to corporate structuring, specifically the leveraged buyout or LBO boom in the 1980s. The RJR Nabisco saga is the poster child here.
The LBO craze was something else. The way it was often pitched to executives was incredibly revealing. It wasn't presented as some complex financial engineering for the company's benefit. It was basically, hey, you get to keep running the company, maybe even be CEO, but you personally will make a hell of a lot more money.
Pure self-interest, dressed up as strategy.
Absolutely. The potential personal windfalls were just astronomical. There's an anecdote in our sources about Frank Benevento, an LBO specialist, calculating the potential cut for the CEO of Beatrice Foods, a guy named Kelly, from their LBO.
How much?
Benevento figured Kelly's personal take could be around $400 million. $400 million. That kind of incentive structure basically guaranteed that executives would push for these deals, loading companies up with massive debt, often jeopardizing their long-term future just for the chance at that huge short-term personal payout.
Which brings us to the extreme end. Failures of governance leading to outright fraud. Theranos is the unavoidable modern example.
Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when a leader's personal ambition completely overrides any sense of corporate integrity or, frankly, reality.
What was the core promise they were selling? Beyond just the finger prick blood tests.
They were telling major pharmaceutical companies that Theranos had this proprietary computer program. Based on their blood test results, this program could supposedly predict how individual patients would react to specific drugs. That was a huge part of their pitch to big pharma.
But the underlying technology just didn't work.
Not even close. And worse, when employees inside Theranos tried to raise alarms about the kinks in the technology, which was a massive understatement.
Like that employee Anna.
Right. When Anna warned Holmes directly about the problems, Holmes's response wasn't to investigate. It was basically to tell Anna to reconsider if Theranos was the right place for her, shutting down dissent.
That kind of management style, rejecting warnings, punishing whistleblowers, that's what allowed the fraud to metastasize, wasn't it? Putting real patients at risk.
Absolutely. It's the dark side of that strongman CEO model when it goes completely off the rails.
Okay, let's pivot now and look forward. How does this long history of monopoly building and power concentration connect to the age of AI? It feels like AI might actually accelerate these trends.
That's a major concern, often called the AI monopoly effect. The argument is that AI-driven industries have an inherent tendency towards monopoly, and the mechanism is this powerful positive feedback loop based on data.
Explain that loop for us.
Okay, so basically, the best AI models need the most data to train on. The companies that already have the most users, think Google, Meta, Amazon, collect the most data.
Which makes their AI better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Better AI attracts more users, which generates even more data, which makes the AI even better, and so on. It's a virtuous cycle for the company, driving down their costs per user. But it also means economic power gets incredibly concentrated in the hands of just a few giant players who own the data in the core models.
So consumers might get cheaper, better services in the short run.
But the long-term result is this massive concentration of wealth and power. One source warns this will rub salt in the open wounds of social inequality. The benefits overwhelmingly flow to the owners of the AI infrastructure.
And you see this concentration playing out in the global competition too, right? Like in self-driving cars.
Definitely. Autonomous systems are a key area. Our sources suggest the U.S. currently has maybe a 2 to 3 year lead over China in self-driving tech.
And why is that? Is it just money?
It's not just money. It seems to be about the concentration of elite talent. Building safe, reliable, autonomous vehicles is incredibly complex. You can't just throw average engineers at it. You need these core teams of world-class engineers to solve the really hard problems, especially around safety and edge cases.
And those top-tier engineers tend to cluster in U.S. tech hubs.
Historically, yes, that concentration of very specific, high-end engineering talent seems to be giving U.S. companies a crucial, though possibly temporary, edge in this particular AI race.
But before we see self-driving cars everywhere, AI and robotics will likely show up in more controlled places first.
That makes sense, right? The immediate economic wins are in highly structured environments. Think factories, warehouses, maybe even farms. Places where the environment is predictable, complexity is lower, safety can be managed more easily. Robots there can create clear value right away before tackling the chaos of, say, a city street.
Okay, let's talk about the other key 21st century infrastructure. The digital town square, social media platforms. The power here feels different, maybe more subtle than a railroad baron's. It's about curation, algorithms.
Exactly. Control here isn't about physical blockades. It's about controlling the flow of information and attention. It's about the social graph. The example of Instagram is really illuminating.
What was the key insight there?
They realized that consistently, the single biggest influencer on Instagram wasn't a celebrity or a brand. It was Instagram itself.
How so? The platform itself.
Yeah, because most users aren't famous. They don't have millions of followers automatically. So how do they get seen? They rely entirely on Instagram's own tools, the algorithm deciding what shows up in feeds, the Explore page discovering new accounts, and especially the suggested user list. Instagram was basically deciding who got visibility, who got amplified. They were doing the king-making.
That's a subtle but incredibly powerful form of control.
Immense control. And the leaders at Instagram were apparently very strategic about protecting the platform's image, keeping it separate from the controversies swirling around its parent company, Facebook.
Right, trying to maintain that escape feeling.
Exactly. They worked hard to position Instagram as this positive, visually focused space, an escape from the arguments and negativity often found on Facebook. And it worked for a long time. Many U.S. users genuinely didn't even realize Facebook owned Instagram. That separation preserved Instagram's unique brand and value.
And this whole idea of platform power goes back to Facebook's core realization early on, doesn't it? About the social graph.
That was the fundamental breakthrough. Facebook realized that just providing online tools wasn't enough. The magic happened when they overlaid those tools onto people's existing real-world social relationships.
Using tags, connections, friends lists.
Right. The social graph became the distribution network. When you shared a photo or a link, it didn't just go out into the void, it went to your friends who might share it with their friends. That built-in social distribution made the platform incredibly sticky and drove explosive growth. It turned Facebook from just another website into essential social infrastructure.
So wrapping this all up, we've really traced this line, haven't we? From Vanderbilt basically saying, I have the power, so the law doesn't matter.
Through Rockefeller's systematic information control and consolidation.
Hughes's incredibly intricate self-serving financial webs.
All the way to the kind of mathematical inevitability of Piketty's R dollar driving wealth concentration.
And ending up with algorithms subtly shaping who and what gets seen in today's digital public square.
It really does feel like a perpetual cycle. The tycoons change, the industries change, the technologies change, but the core process seems constant. Identify the crucial infrastructure of the era, rails, oil, finance, information flow, then apply aggressive, often controversial methods to gain control.
And despite huge economic growth, regulatory efforts over the decades, that fundamental challenge of inequality, often driven by capital outpacing growth, it just persists.
It seems baked into the system in a way. The structures of power evolve, but the concentration game looks remarkably similar across centuries.
Which brings us back to that central question we started with, really.
Yeah, if we accept that knowledge is most valuable when it's actually understood and used, what does that mean for these entities, these companies, or even powerful individuals?
When they control the absolute bedrock infrastructure that society runs on, whether that's railroads back then, or the oil pipelines, or the financial system, or now the algorithms in the social graph itself,
What responsibility comes with that level of control over the operating system of modern life? That's the question we really need to keep wrestling with, isn't it? It demands constant scrutiny, constant critical thinking from all of us.